Hey Dan, how are you doing?
Mike, great to be here. I'm good. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. Awesome to have you on here to talk all things about sleep. And I think it's kind of interesting. I always laugh at like the first time I met you, I believe was it Paleo Effects? Was it 4 or 5 years ago now?
I think so.
Yeah, and we had stayed up till 3 in the morning drinking tequila talking about sleep research, which is kind of funny and paradoxical all at the same time.
It's a bit ironic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh man, I can't tell you how many times I have given a presentation on sleep, having gotten less than ideal sleep the night before, and I just feel like the biggest hypocrite in the world.
Yeah, I often told people, I'm like, the worst thing to do for your body composition and performance is to do a PhD in your field. Just as you know from doing PhD work, it's not like the greatest thing ever. It's good to have the knowledge and all that stuff at the end, but man, you wake up some days going, I'm studying this infinitesimally small little area at the expense of the thing I'm trying to improve. So it's, yeah.
The irony, it's so sweet.
Yeah.
Bittersweet. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I do remember that night, in fact, too. That was fun. That was at the Ancestral Health Symposium.
That's right. That's right.
And it was in Atlanta.
Yep.
And yeah, going to the AHS events has been really fun. If a listener hasn't been, their Ancestral Health Symposium, and it's all about how to live more like your ancestors, or at least what we can learn from ancestral patterns. And so it's a little more, I would say, on the scientific side than versus paleo effects, which is, I would say, I call it more like the business of paleo. But anyway, the very first one was at UCLA, and it convened a bunch of these people that had been writing in the space, from Stephan Guyenet to Rob Wolf and to varieties of others, and it was fun to have everybody in the same room at the same time. And now we've all been in the same room at the same time a lot of times, but that was the first couple of years, had a lot of energy to it, and we met there.
Yeah, and speaking of sort of an ancestral health viewpoint, which I would agree works very well, what are some of the things or sort of revelations that have been good regarding sleep? I mean, I think most people listening to this kind of know the basics of making your room dark and a little bit cooler and that kind of stuff, but I know there's been some more recent research looking at more sleep patterns, and did maybe people sleep all the way through the night, or how much sleep should they get? What are kind of things you've kind of realized from looking at sleep through an ancestral health viewpoint?
Yeah, so there have been studies now, really for the first time, looking at sleep specifically in a variety of different hunter-gatherer communities. So the Hadza in Tanzania, the Chimane of Bolivia, the San of Namibia, and the Malagasy of Madagascar. These are all different tribes of people that live different than you and I do, right? If you're listening to this podcast, then I can guarantee it. They don't have electricity. They don't have artificial light. Some of them will maintain small-scale agriculture and horticultural practices, so they are raising some vegetables or domesticating animals, but most of them are hunter-gatherers, so they're really living like ancestors did, before the Neolithic era. And it's, we tend to have, some of us have this idea that it was just so much better a long time ago. And with sleep, now that we've been able to study their sleep more closely, a couple of surprising findings have come up that they actually don't sleep longer. So one hypothesis was that these people, because they don't have artificial light, sleep longer than we do in modern society. And it's actually not true. So Jerry Siegel at UCLA showed that they sleep within the average range, but it's on the lower end. And so, for example, they sleep 5.9 hours to 6.4 hours. That was a common range. Now, if you hear that number, you think, well, that's really low.
Yeah, it seems low.
Yeah. There's definitely a difference between sleep time and sleep period. And so sleep period is how most people self-report sleep, right? So you don't go to bed at midnight and wake up at 8 and say, well, I what you would do is you would say, I slept 8 hours, right? I was in bed that long. What you don't say is, I went to bed at midnight, I woke up at 8, I had 85% sleep efficiency, and therefore my sleep time was 6 hours and 42 minutes, right? I mean, that's what a sleep study will tell you. And so, these people were actually sleeping about 7 to 8.5 hours. That was their bed period. And that's pretty common for us as well. So none of us have perfect sleep efficiency. If you do, you're not getting enough sleep. It means you're exhausted. And and so that's one thing that was interesting. And actually, they don't have great sleep overall, but they do have very strong circadian amplitude, and that means that the robustness of their circadian rhythm or body timing is very strong. And the strength of that means that we have all sorts of processes that are taking place in our body that essentially what a circadian rhythms are trying to do is to understand past behavior and exposures to try to predict appropriate physiological timing for today, right? So that's why, it's more likely that you feel like going to the bathroom and eating during the day than you do at night when you're sleeping, right? So you could have this 8-hour fast, and you're not getting, you don't have to go to the bathroom 15 times. And, if you do have nocturia, that's something separate. That's a condition. But you also have times of the day where you're producing certain enzymes. So if you eat at the exact same time every day, your body knows to release digestive enzymes and other hormones that help you process that meal actually better. And that's better than if you have eating times that are all over the map. And so we end up performing, or the body ends up understanding what time of day it is through our master clock, and then creating what are called phase relationships. And so you have, times of the day where melatonin is high and growth hormone is high and cortisol is low. And that's going to essentially kind of create a lock into a key that tells the cells, okay, do this activity at this time. And when we have very strong circadian amplitude, the body performs really well, and it actually helps to prevent disease and all sorts of problems with our metabolism and cancers, et cetera. And so even though they don't get a lot of sleep, they're happy. They're not walking around really sleepy all day. And they also have, very good health, measurements of health. And so that's probably the most important thing that we can learn from them is, really controlling our light environment, is because that's the main synchronizer of your circadian timing, is probably one of the most important things we can do for our health.
And related to that, you had mentioned a lot of them don't have electricity. So when I was down in Costa Rica, my friend Dr. Ben House, who's got a really awesome place down there, and it was fascinating to me that they don't have, he's in the middle of the jungle, like literally, and there's lights and they have power, but it's not like huge amount of lights like anywhere in the U.S. It gets really dark and you're closer to the equator, so you've got, a period of dark that's almost the same year round. And it was fascinating to me about being away from a lot of the artificial light, which I tend not to think about. And I'm like, it's 7:30. I'm really freaking tired. Oh, it's dark out. And it seems so basic, but I think until you go somewhere where all that stimulation is kind of removed, it's kind of easy to forget about all the other things that we don't really control. I think people are pretty good at could probably be controlling lights in their house and things of that nature too, but it's a lot of the accessory light and other things I think that's easy to forget about.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. So much of our health is in response to our environment. And it's an interesting way to think about it, that sometimes we think, we have everything that we need within us in order to be healthy, but that's actually not true. We require sunshine and, of course, air and of course, light. So aside from just the stimulation on the skin to produce vitamin D and even nitric oxide, we also know that it's coming into the eye and it's telling the brain what time of day it is. And we also have food, right? So the world around us is a part of our health. And we've been able to institutionally shield ourselves from what is a common pattern of exposure to different environmental signals. And because of that, we make ourselves more comfortable by wearing sweaters and by, controlling temperature within the room. So we live in this sort of perpetual summer. And, there's really no good research understanding the seasonality effects of varying light over the course of a year. But even then, we do know that we're getting less sleep than we were even 40 years ago, just looking at modern culture. And that a lot of that time is filled with light. But the light is interesting. It's a different type of light. It's less intense. And we spend 90% of our time indoors. And so we're not getting as bright a light signal, during the morning, during the day, and then we're getting too much at night. And so it's really easy to identify that the light pattern is really distinct between how we live as modern humans and what it's like for those living still according to more like the natural pattern of light exposure. And there's some work done by Kenneth Wright, who's at the University of Colorado, who did his PhD under Chuck Seisler at Harvard, who's one of the fathers of circadian biology. And he brought people camping for a couple of days to look at their melatonin cycles. And yes, they all fall asleep, more quickly. They all have more robust melatonin cycles. They all had, subjective improvements in alertness and objective improvements in reaction time the subsequent days. And these are all normal people that had no problem, but they all felt better after just a couple of days of living according to a natural cycle. So it's powerful.
Yeah, that's super cool. And one of probably the biggest tips I took away from you is having myself and my clients just get up and go walk first thing in the morning or eat outside during lunch. Even in Minnesota here where it gets pretty cold, the nice part is that it's relatively sunny during the winter. It's not like Seattle or Ohio or some other places. But I've just noticed anecdotally in clients how much better. They're more tired in the evening, and pretty much everyone across the board just reports that they just feel better. It's not something that's uber sexy with high intensity training and everything else we have going on, and there's benefits to those things too. But I think it's sometimes the more simple things that seem almost too simple that we tend to kind of poo-poo. A lot of times I tell clients it's not really my job to give you new and sexy things all the time. It's to kind of remind you to do the things you already know you should be doing. And I'm just guilty of that at times too.
So that's a really big emphasis in my work as well, Mike. And I call it the mundane but meaningful.
I like that.
Yeah. And it's stuff that we know matters. But you're not going to be posting about it on Instagram or Facebook, right?
Crushed my 20-minute walk this morning. Yay me.
Yeah, exactly. Unless you have mud on your face and you're diving under electrically charged ponds, then it's that's the stuff that it's sort of a weird. We live in a weird world, right? In so many ways, and actually, I think some of those challenges, those physical challenges, can be, if they're fun for you, great. It's a way to challenge your body, and it's social, and they're unique. That's great. But so much of our health, I think what ends up happening for many people in the world is they over-index their health efforts in just a few areas, and there's so many different areas that matter. And I think with the democratization of information, we're hearing a lot of those important, but whether it's they're mundane or whether they're actually just not getting enough attention. I think that the best way to stimulate your health is to have this balanced approach where you're getting the right stimulation from a lot of different angles, because we can't, if you use the analogy, just eating well is not going to prevent the need for you to sleep well, and just sleeping well isn't going to prevent the need for you to exercise. In fact, they're just mutually reinforcing. So they're beneficial. When you eat well, you feel more like being physically active. When you're physically active, you feel more like getting good sleep. When you get good sleep, you feel more like being physically active, right? They're mutually reinforcing in that way, but they're not, one doesn't replace the other. And similarly, we have to take care of our gut. We have to we have to expose ourselves to the right amount of stress. So we have to be able to manage stress, psychological stress on one side. We have to actually find ways to get stress in our lives from another front, whether it's cold exposure, whether it's xenohermetics in plants, whether it's even sun exposure, right? The body requires, a lot of inputs. And they all, like I said, they're all sort of mutually reinforcing too. So we know that, for example, if you take people and you put them under bed rest, this has been done experimentally, and it's been done intentionally for people that have, let's say, an injury like a broken femur, their sleep becomes terrible. And, it becomes fragmented.
Sure.
They have more middle of the night awakenings. It's less restorative. And so physical activity, having a certain amount of it actually does really help with sleep. But it's even not that hard to get the amount that we need. And yet we are so sedentary that when you look at a common pattern of living, or movement, which is probably nobody listening to this, the amount of physical activity that many Americans get is on par to the amount that people get that have cerebral palsy, that have a musculoskeletal disorder that's life-threatening. And that's, it's shocking. And it just has to do with really the drivers and the forces of life in today's world, right? When we have to sit in front of a computer, that is our survival, for many, is to perform cognitive work, staring into a seemingly bright LED screen all day and just doing our tasks. And I'm in that world as well. So we have to figure out ways to empower ourselves to then make better decisions. And I think some of that comes with knowledge, and some of it comes with technology, and some of it just comes simply with mindset, and some of it comes with, and that mindset can be one of exploration. It can be one of just personal empowerment, one of taking on responsibility for aspects of your health. It's not your doctor's responsibility to eat well or to exercise. And, they're not even there to keep you, they're not designed for wellness. They're designed really about sick care. And even though, the major issue now in the world, in the United States, it's chronic disease, which is really a lifestyle concern. So you're the one that's going to be doing the things that, matter in that mundane category. Now, if you have a clinical sleep issue, if you have any sort of other issue, we can get help from professionals that have real expertise that could provide real value. So I'm not somebody that's like, hey, just sacrifice all doctors stink. It's your responsibility. Doctors play a super valuable role. They don't get the credit they deserve. And one of the problems is because we overlook to them to do things that actually just fall into a different bucket, that wellness bucket. That word kind of stinks too, but it's really about self-care. How do you actually, and other cultures, they grow up with a lot of education and even play as a child is about learning about how to take care of yourself. And what that means now is usually just all about making your brain as smart as they possibly can. You can argue about whether the way we do that is good, but we really need to learn. It should be a part of our world to have self-care from a physical perspective. That should be PE, right? We should have time for actually play in our school day, but we should also have a separate period of time where we're learning about how to take care of ourselves. And because otherwise, it's really easy to do it wrong.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And on the movement side, once I remember Dr. Dan Pardi saying that all these people were sending him email and they're like, but I'm healthy, I exercise. And he's like, but most of you, if we looked at your activity during the day, it's sedentary, no movement. Ooh, massive spike of like the hardest movement possible. No movement. It's like we all want to sort of seems gravitate towards the extremes. And one thing I've been trying to do, which I think is a benefit of having, Fitbits and watches that measure step count, is when I do coaching and work with people online, it gives me a relatively good proxy to see how much they're moving. If I've got client A who, moves 2,500 steps a day and client B who moves 9,000 steps a day, it's a pretty good indicator of, about how much they're getting up and moving around. Again, I like your words, the kind of boring and mundane work, but that's the things that kind of add up over time.
So for my platform, Human OS, this is why I separate things like steps, and now steps are a marker of low intensity physical activity.
Right.
Now, if you sat in a chair and fidgeted, that's also a marker of low intensity physical activity. But we have this device that easily captures this aspect of low intensity movement, which is steps. And you're right. So as I've been looking into reading articles, there's always a comment in the discussion section on papers that talk about 10,000 steps per day that say, there seems to be an additional benefit for those that actually had those steps, integrated into the day versus just like walking 10,000 steps first thing in the morning and then going back and being sedentary. Now, some of that might be one part of the problem, might simply be sedentary behavior. Another part of the problem might also be lack of low intensity movement. So they're different, right? They kind of seem like the same thing, but sitting too long is different than just not getting enough light intensity activity. And then I also think that our performance orientation in sports has led us a bit astray as well. So much of physical activity is about performance, and what I'm much more interested in is not that you had your fastest mile time or your best bench press or your best deadlift in 2007, but what does your lifestyle look like on a day-by-day basis between then and now over this last 10-year period? Again, kind of boring. If you are, I walked 10,000 steps a day and I had a level of physical activity that matched the Department of Health and Human Services weekly exercise goals. Those are validated recommendations that's a task force of people that come together, of exercise physiologists, the top in the U.S. They read the literature and they say this is what is supported by the literature, and those types of things are boring, right? Because your finding is the most defensible position about at least what the data says, right? And then as concepts change, there's a task force now that is convening for the 2018 HHS recommendations. Those are going to come out this next year. And so, the last one was, I think, in 2010 or 11. And so, I mean, those are sort of slow moving. But my point is that, you might care that you had certain performance highlights at different times of life. What I care about is that you're able to maintain, a balance, and that you're able to actually provide a sufficiency of physical activity in your life and do so in the right manner consistently. And I think what the performance orientation always has people do is try to get better, right? You have to run faster, you have to lift more, and that can be a double-edged sword. It can motivate people to actually get out and do it, and it can also run people right off a cliff. And for me, I've had a real serious change in my perspective about, because I grew up playing sports and was really into them and had goals, and now my goal is to feel my sharpest day after day. And for me to do that, getting a walk every day, 10,000 steps. And then I created something called In-Tune training, which stands for integrative and opportunistic training. And so it's a daily body weight oriented workout. There's over 100 different workouts in it. It's part of Human OS, and you basically get a different workout every day. Every workout's about the same workload, and it's not a lot. But I try to do it every day. And it's things like, running in place, to push-ups, to sit-ups, to so it's plyometric, upper body, lower body, some cardio, some core, and it's just meant posterior chain. It's just meant to be balanced. Every day is a little bit different, and I've been doing that for years. And quite honestly, I've never really felt better because I don't walk around really sore, but I walk around relatively ready. Like if somebody invites me to go do mountain biking, I'm fit enough to hop on my bike and go do that. I might be 2 weeks out from being really fit in that specialized exercise, but I feel like I'm generally ready by utilizing this training technique. So that's sort of my that's my. I don't think that's the only way to be physically healthy, but I think it's a really good one because it helps you break up activity into the day, so you're mixing it into your day. And it also helps you, it's easy just to say yes, like, all right, well, I can just chip away at this. So if it's like, let's say the workout has you doing 50 push-ups as one of the different exercises, you're like, I'll just do, 20 now and I'll do 25 later. And, you just mix it into your day according to, what the opportunities that your day provides.
Yeah. And I think that's really cool because I was part of a study that unfortunately never got published because we didn't really find a result when we stratified it into groups. But we were looking at, they put insulin and primarily a glucose monitor on people. They did multiple insulin draws. And they were looking at people who were seated versus standing. And they had them do exercise. It was a group that was borderline type 2 diabetics. And long and short of it was that the people who stood up their glucose control was a little bit better. And this is a group who had, kind of sketchy glucose control to begin with. And what was interesting, too, is that when they looked at the accelerometer data, the group that was standing spontaneously moved around more. And if you think about it, I've often wondered about, have standing desks and things like that. And I think that's, good, but I think it's the movement variety, of standing, of sitting, of, like you said, doing a few push-ups, doing body weight drills, being just more physically active, I think, during the day. And what I've noticed with clients, too, and myself, especially related to performance, I still have performance goals that I definitely want to hit, but I've also noticed I've become much more intolerant of being really sore, being very painful, and then stepping back and looking at my entire life and be like, okay, what is kind of the overarching, goals? I don't really want to get injured. I don't really want a lot of pain. I want to, have blood markers that are still, good. And, if I were to pick one, I'd rather, be able to go kiteboarding whenever I want and can't be so sore that I can't do the things that I enjoy. And then if I can kind of fit performance, the metrics within that, the caveat being, it may take me a little bit longer, but I'm okay with that. Like some of my goals have a timeline of 10 to 15 years. It's not like I'm trying to, because every time I got injured, when I looked in the past in terms of non-contact injury or non-sports related injury, it was me just being an idiot trying to push everything too fast, too soon. It's like, I shouldn't have been doing that, but I wanted to get this XYZ goal by this time frame, and now I'm screwed for like 6 months.
It's been really, it's really interesting when my wife, Samara, I call her the natural, and something you just said reminded me of this. So, when we met, I was, if you looked in my cabinets, I had protein powders and all these supplements that I was taking. And I always, it's fun for me to just try new products and stuff. So I still do like that. But with her, she grew up, gardening her own vegetables. She's from West Marin. So she would drive down to the dock and get fish from, one of her contacts that was a fisherman there. She'd go to Marin Sun Farms to get meat. So at the butcher counter at the farm, and then they'd cook every day. And then she, for running, she'd do she'd do some yoga and she'd do running. And and I asked her at one time, I'm like, would you ever, do a marathon or a half marathon? She's like, no way. And, and, she's like, why? There was just nothing. She just does things she just completely listens to her body, and she completely enjoys the lifestyle. It's not about competition. It's not about getting faster, better. It's just about feeling good. And I think sometimes, again, competition I don't think is automatically a bad thing. It can be for people, and there's a variety of ways it can be. One is if you're performing off of your peak, that can feel demotivating and it's hard to get back to the gym.
Yeah.
Two, that it can be rather intense. And so the mental threshold of what's required when you go to the gym, it's going to be like, all right, I got to bust my ass. And so you tend to maybe not listen to what your body's telling you as much. That leads to injury and overuse. It leads to, getting sick more often. And so just being around her, I was like, okay, here's somebody that never gets sick, is very, very fit, and I was like, okay, she just has a very good relationship with health in general. And I attributed it to big changes in the way that I was doing things to just being around her a lot. And that was pretty instructive to me. Yeah,
I love that. And one of the concepts I use is what I call I stole this from someone, I'm sure, but just everyday performance. If someone wants to be quote unquote healthy, and we know some of the top longevity markers are more performance related, aerobic performance, VO2 max, lower body strength, grip strength, things of that nature. I've always wondered about people who need 17 warm-up sets to get to 90% of their 1-rep max, right? Their performance on paper looks pretty good, but a lot of work and a lot of other stuff to get to that point, right? And one thing I'll measure on myself once in a while, I don't recommend people start there, but for a deadlift, what's the heaviest weight I think I can just walk out into the gym and pick up? No warm up, no nothing in particular. Obviously, I don't want to get injured. I'm not going to kind of push myself to an area where I'm not there. And then over time, can I do less and less warm ups and feel pretty good? Instead of going the reverse, if I'm really trying to maximize performance all the time, I'm probably going to take a few more warm ups, probably do a few other things. And what I've noticed is that if my kind of everyday numbers are a little bit higher, well, my max numbers also go up, right? And to me, if I want the transfer to other parts of my life, for a lot of lifts, I don't use a belt or things like that. Not that I'm against them, but if I'm performing other tasks, I'm not using that, right? So I kind of want a little bit more of that transfer, even though if I looked at it on per paper, it's probably a lower percentage or a lower load that I'm moving because I've opted not to use those things. Again, it depends on what is your goal and what are you trying to achieve.
One thing that I noticed when I was doing Intune is, and you mentioned it as well, like, I just don't tolerate, you said, I don't tolerate walking around feeling sore all the time. That was my experience too, just always, it's like you feel like crap, and then until like the day you're ready to, and then for just on that day, you start it all over again. Like it's 3 days, you go by, then you break down the muscles again. And, so that's definitely an experience that I've had a lot in my past. And what I've noticed now is because the Intune workouts are actually not very long, they're pretty short, that I'm getting the regular endocrinological effects of exercise from muscle daily. And what it's done is it's the opposite. Instead of draining me, it's actually energized me. So I'm energized within the day because movement facilitates blood flow and muscular activity. Also, both of those will affect cognition within the day. But then the chronic practice of that, I'm not really tapping deep into my energy reserves. And so I'm waking up like, okay, I've got all this energy, and that is a life that I like, like that I can certainly, prioritize that feeling over, I don't know, having another inch on my biceps or, but I mean, it's not that I think of composition goals, people that are pursuing that as necessarily bad. I think of it as having sometimes risks, and it's definitely not right for a lot of people. And so I like to talk about this as an alternative that actually makes a lot of sense. And I think for a lot of people that do hear it, it's relieving because they can let go. Particularly if they're former athletes, you sort of see your life with physical activity in reference to how you developed as a young person, and going hard and getting better, and to sort of change that mindset and say, okay, let's entirely focus on how you feel and how you're thinking today and tomorrow. Then that's really, really powerful. And it can motivate you because then you still have the motivation to do it. But you're also not having to, I think, do something where the goal is superseding how you're feeling and what might even be just best for you.
Yeah, one of the models I use is a eustress versus a distress model. So eustress, stress you can more easily recover from. Distress, stress is going to take you a while to recover from. And neither one is good or bad, but I find that with clients too, if I can push their volume in more of a eustress fashion, which again will be completely different from one person to the next depending on their capacity, that I can get, like you were saying, a lot of the beneficial effects. You can get the effect of blood glucose, insulin, building muscle, all those kind of things. People generally feel better. One of the tips I got from Pavel Tsatsouline was, when you're done with most training, you should feel like you want to wrestle a bear. So I think that's more of the eustress model. And you're going to have days that are more of a distress. And, if you want to go all out and go bonkers once in a while, that's cool. I think it's a good mental test, and there's definitely benefits there too. But I think a lot of people mistake that and think they need to live on that distress side, especially when they don't have their recovery parameters in line. Nutrition's kind of a mess. Their outside stress is super high. Their circadian rhythms all wonky, and you just see those people kind of unfortunately work harder and get less and less results for all the effort that they put in.
Yeah, I think I think what we want to have that relationship with ourselves, and what I do is I let my body tell me when I'm ready to go harder, and I just then want to create an environment, sort of, if you will, mentally, so that mindset of being reactive to that, and then also physically, where I don't have a lot of barriers to then do something more intense, but my body's guiding me versus like even an HRV score. It's really that subjective feeling. And so my goal is to be physically active every day and have a sufficiency of low intensity physical activity. And then in there, I want to do some stuff that challenges my body a little bit harder, but sometimes that's like lower intensity on the exercise scale, ranging from, a hike upstairs that just gets the body rate, the heart rate going, to stuff where I'm, working on mobility and balance. It's not really hard, but I'm challenging my body in some important way, to then stuff where it's like, all right, I'm gonna go harder. And again, being reactive. So, you have better days than you do. Some days are better than others. And then some times within a day are better than others too. And so when everything's not hyper planned, but you just have the right mindset and can react, I think that that's a more durable approach for many, maybe not everybody, but for many, because it's, the day you've got 16 hours in your day that's going to provide you with some opportunity to do something. And also, you develop a positive relationship with your physical activity practice because you trust yourself to always be giving yourself what the body needs. And that's a lot better than the punitive nature of pushing hard. Because then it's just like, don't listen to myself, just go, don't be a sissy, just, work hard. And that, unfortunately, I think is the sort of like probably the default mentality for a lot of physical activity, in the modern world, which is, just go harder or you're a wimp.
Yeah, it reminds me of I think it was the Beastie Boys quote of, check yourself before you wreck yourself,
Yeah.
Cool. So as we're finishing up here, if we go back to the topic of sleep in terms of recovery and regeneration, one of the things you said that their sleep efficiency in the studies was not super high. And I think that's actually one of the areas where I know I've probably made a mistake and probably still tend to go that route, is that I'm like, if I can just get my sleep efficiency, even higher, then I can, condense, 8 hours of sleep into 6 hours. And I spend years trying to do that with pretty much no avail. And it was probably like 2 years ago I finally just said, okay, screw it, forget it. I'm just here's a novel idea. Let my body sleep as much as I possibly can, since I control my schedule now and that type of thing. So I'm like, so I'm just going to try going to bed earlier and earlier, try to keep same time I go to bed, same time I wake up. And if I can, just see how long I sleep and see how I feel. It's like, okay, so yeah, I slept about 8.5, 9 hours a night. I feel much better. And so maybe I just need that amount of time. And I've worked with a few clients too, where I think it's easy to get obsessed over the data, whether the sleep data is correct or not on consumer stuff is again debatable. But it's relieving that their sleep efficiency was not 100%. Right? Because I think people think, I woke up a few times at night. My sleep is horrible. I'm just screwed now, which doesn't appear to be correct.
Yeah, that's right. So we tend to think of efficiency as a good thing. And actually, you always have to be careful with efficiency when you're talking about the body. So, for example, metabolic efficiency might mean that you're actually storing fat more easily versus, right? So efficiency in a biological context, you can't look at it as like linear, more is better. And sometimes it's the opposite. In the terms of sleep, it's actually normal. So the National Sleep Foundation recommends that for good quality sleep, that your sleep efficiency is over 85%. And that's pretty common. So if you have sleep efficiency in general that's lower than that, then that might be worth looking into. You could have sleep apnea. You could have restless leg syndrome. Both are clinical sleep disorders that do disrupt the continuity and staging of sleep. So both are important. Or excuse me, that the sleep efficiency, it does matter, but we also see that there's a compensation that takes place. So if you're getting less sleep, you might see that your sleep efficiency is a little bit higher, and if you get longer sleep, you might see that your sleep efficiency is a little lower, and so your body can adjust a bit. Now, I find that I have the most restorative sleep when my sleep is on the longer side, and maybe if my sleep efficiency is like, let's say 80 versus 90, so it's a little lower than it is higher. Yeah, I wouldn't judge my ability, how good sleep was based off of that. It's, what people should seek is, how can I play with my sleep given my lifestyle and what's required of me to feel my very best? And you can't necessarily, I think you have to look at sleep, measures of, what's happening to your sleep secondarily, right? So it should really be assessed by subjective, like, do I feel good in the morning? Do I have good alertness throughout the day? People drink coffee just because it tastes good, but do you really, really need it in order to even perform at all? And so, those are things that you really want to be considering. Is my sleep restorative? And I wouldn't worry too much about sleep efficiency unless it falls well outside of the range. So that's those are some important points. And then a lot of things. You can't sleep more deeply by squinting and trying to. I'm gonna get good sleep, right? A lot of
must sleep now.
Right, exactly. A lot of the things that are going to determine the sleep that you get are actually dependent upon the things that you do during the day and also the regularity of the timing of your sleep. So let's say you get 7 hours of sleep one night, you get 7 hours of sleep the next night, but the timing of that second night's sleep is shifted 4 or 5 hours. Sleep is not going to be as restorative generally than it would be if you were sleeping very consistently. It's the body, live like a clock, right? And eat at the same time, try to sleep at the same time. And those are some efficiency things that actually are good and that I would encourage. And so for any hour of sleep that you get, in general, it's going to be more restorative. It's going to lead to better sleep satisfaction than if you're going to bed at the same time every night and you're waking up pretty close to the same time every morning.
Cool. That's awesome. Well, thank you very much for all your info here today, Dan. We really appreciate it. We covered a wide variety of topics that I think are extremely useful for people to hear again, and a lot of it is just reminding them about things that they can work on to get better. Where can people find out more about you?
Well, yeah, I think you can come over to humanos.me. That's the tool that I've been working on for 7 years now, but it's all based off of a behavior model that I put together. The purpose of that model is to help people be more knowledgeable about what's known in the world that can direct your health practice or the things you do to try to be healthy. So nutrition information, exercise information, sleep information, etc. Be more knowledgeable about yourself, and then also be better, more skilled at regulating your pattern of living, because you can have a lot of knowledge and a lot of skill, but if it doesn't translate into action in your life that's durable and sustainable, I have a saying that, information does not vaccinate you from living a healthy lifestyle, right? And so you see people like this, the professors that know more, arguably more than anybody in a particular subject, and if they're not acting upon that information, if it relates to health, they're not going to be benefiting, at all. And so, so come on over. We make peer-reviewed health courses. We integrate with a lot of different types of trackers. We have daily workouts, and we're going to be adding a lot more cool features to the site. But I describe it as a personal health mastery platform, the goal of which is to make you increasingly better at your health. And so I consider it a companion that you kind of use every day to several times a week. And by doing so, you actually are healthier.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've seen a lot of the stuff you've put out there, and it's very high quality and very well done and very well representative of what we currently know, but also making it actionable too, which is a very rare combination. So Thank you very much, and greatly appreciate it.
Mike, I really appreciate you having me on the show. It's always great to connect with you. Just for the listener, just know Mike and I always hang out a lot when we're at any of these conferences, and so it's an honor to be on your show here. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. See ya.